Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first part of a multi-part series on bridging the gap between sports and education. I'm your host, Michelle Fenelon, joined by Everett High School Vice Principal, who is also the president of the Urban Coaches Association and five-time state champ. You may have heard of him before, Cory McCarthy. Cory, thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for having me. I am excited to be here in Everett. I'm excited to have this conversation with you about building youth programs.
Thank you. For tonight's coaching clinic, we are having a very important conversation about youth sports, not just winning and losing, but everything that goes into building a program. Before we get into our dialogue, I want to start it off with you, Cory. Why is it so important for cities and communities to invest in youth sports?
Well, if you look at cities and gateway towns in particular, there's a lot of social economic background struggles, right? And there's a lot of social economic struggles around opportunity. There's a lot of struggles around resources. There's a lot of struggles around finding things for kids to do. I believe that investing cities invest in so many things that don't support or help kids. I think it's time that we start really thinking about investing in youth programs. And that's for a lot of sports. Introducing kids to sports, keeps them motivated, building a long-term trajectory for them to really head to college or build a career or use the same skills. Who you are, me personally, I believe that who you are on the court or who you are on the field reflects on who you are off the field. If you're selfish on the court and not sharing, if you're selfish in the field and not sharing, odds are you are not the person that's getting up for an older woman to sit down on the bus or being kind to your classmates. And I think it should be taught on the youth level as young as 4, as young as 3. Learning a sport brings so much self-efficacy and value to you, to a student, and to the adult, and to potentially a school. And there's an alignment that needs to happen. Like most urban school or urban districts do not have youth programming, and they don't have solid youth programming. So I'm going to go into a quick presentation really quick that's going to sort of like frame what my thinking is around building youth programming. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so when I say from the mud, that means like it literally is just mush, right? Everybody perceives it as something that, that can't be made into a diamond, that can't be made into something productive. And for me, building a program, you have to start it from the mud. You have to blow things up in a sense if your program's not solid, and you have to proceed by truly starting from scratch. But you have to start with like principles, right? And what are your principles of starting a program, right? What do you believe in, right? And who you are as a person will reflect that, right? What are your values? What do you want the kids to believe in? Because you're the immediate model. You're that person that's going to get the most engagement from a child, right? From a middle schooler, from a high school student, from a college student, right? And you have to answer these questions if you want to build your principles. How do you prepare to win, right? And when I say prepare to win, what is the expectation? Do you help kids understand that yes, you can win in so many different ways, or can you win and have so much more work to do? Because if you're looking at the long-term trajectory, life is about short wins, right? But how you prepare to win and how you absorb your next step or prepare for the next win is very valuable. So it's a very critical thing. The next thing is, how do you define winning? What do you want people to know? What do you want kids to understand what winning is? How do you help kids understand how to process winning? What is a win? Like, is a good report card equivalent to winning by 30? What is the difference between winning by 30 or winning by 1? and what could you learn from there? And then the next thing is, how do you help kids win from losing, right? There's plenty of times in your coach's career, for you coaches out there who are watching, in your coach's career, many of us, we don't learn from the 30-point victories. We don't learn from by winning by 7 or 8 goals. A lot of times we learn from losing. And there's been teams that I personally played against, and the first game I beat them by 40, the next game I beat them by 15, and all of a sudden I'm in a dogfight in the third game. Why? Because those kids have the ability. That's a beauty of children, is that they psychologically or subconsciously learn from losing. I'm not saying it's okay to do that, but there's a lot of variables from losing that elevate kids to build a winning mindset, or not repeat mistakes, or put more effort in, right? And the next step is to sort of is to innovate ways to build trust. And sometimes people want to meditate with their teams. Sometimes people get group chats. Sometimes you just talk about things that are not related to the sport. You build relationships through like commonalities, or help kids discover things about each other, so that you don't create a hierarchy within your team. So those are some of the basic things that you could do, but it all reflects on you, the coach, and what your values are. My next thing is sustain your program with teachable moments. You want those remember when. Remember when Tammy Turner was your coach. Remember when Tammy Turner kicked you out of practice one day, and the next game you came back and had 20 points. Remember when Coach Cory McCarthy kicked me out of the car one day. I did that. I kicked my players out of a car one day, and I wanted to make sure they got home. And I followed them, and I drove right side by side with them on the road. And those are moments that kids talk about all the time. And understand, the best thing about youth coaching is that kids carry this more than they carry their college experiences. Many times than they carry their pro experiences. Those remember when moments. And it has to be attributed to what the environment the coach builds, and the principles that he or she has, right? And then use the terms that adults use. Yes, if you have a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old. Accountability, what does that mean? How could it be felt? Right? Like, accountability is such a huge word in sports. Character improvement, right? Teaching kids about what a random act of kindness is. Or on the flip side, what is something that could prove to be a deterrent to their personal development, and what it means to show good character. The next thing is inspiration. What inspires you? A lot of kids say their parents. Some kids, it becomes their coach. Some people look at heroes. They're heroes in a particular sport, but then you just have to help them break that down. It's not Michael Jordan that inspires me. It's the drive that he has, his ability to relate everything to a winning and put himself in a winning situation. The next stage is to help kids understand what their differences are, right? That cuts out a lot of the bullying, and it builds a lot of trust, or that it cuts out a lot of embarrassment and potential humiliation. Right? And you do that by using prompts and dialogue, right? Simple questions. Tell me anywhere on earth you'd like to visit, and where would it be, right? And that just creates a higher order of what kids want. Okay, at one point, and when I was 5, I wanted to go to Florida, but now that I'm 10 and 11, and we keep having these conversations, I wanted to go to the Bahamas. But I'm 17 now. I want to go to Japan, right? And this helps students become good listeners. Active listening is huge in sports. Active and teaching the skill of listening through understanding what the differences of opinion or similarities or opinions could bring to the table. And then you build trust through sharing, right? And building trust. Hey, you know what? I don't like McDonald's, but I don't go to McDonald's because I know how to cook. Cory, why do you know how to cook? Can you teach me? Or why is it so valuable that I have this agency? And who taught it to me? And how can I learn how to cook? How could I learn from you? When you get kids to start learning from each other instead of judging each other, you end up building a stronger core and from your team, and they expect more from each other. They're now taking charge of the learning. And then you start talking and building about the 40-year plan, not the 4-year plan of playing in high school, not the 8-year plan of playing high school and college, not the 12-year plan of high school, college, and possibly playing a little bit of pro. How about 40 years, right? Taking advantage of a college degree, taking advantage of a career, and saying, hey, I want to learn how to provide for my family. I'll put my family and myself in a better position than my parents put me, right? And then let's talk about it, right? What is life beyond being a pro? What is your secondary plan? Everybody wants to go to the NBA. Everybody wants to go to the NFL. However, it's your job as a coach to help them make that second plan of which is usually the 40-year plan, become their first plan. All right, yes, I'm 11. I want to go to NFL, but when I'm 18, yes, I want to be a venture capitalist. And what does that mean? Coach, help me understand what that means. And this helps students become pros at being a person, right? You want to become pro as an educator, as a lawyer, as a doctor, as anything you do, you put that same level of effort that your youth coach put into you. So there's 5 functions of creating a system, because everybody needs a system, and everybody talks about, I think what me personally as a coach, we'll get into that, but my system is just based on effort and toughness, right? Like everything we do, it's tough. Everything, like if the ball is loose, if something drops in the cafeteria, I want my players running and jumping on it like anything. If someone stares at their teammate wrong, I want players to be ready. So, but everything must be felt and begin with effort. Effort is a non-negotiable. If you have to coach effort, you are not going to build a strong program. How you teach effort is through accountability, right? And measuring what everybody's good at. Timmy might not be able to win every race, but Timmy may be able to jump high. So so when you're who's probably going to win the race. Who's going to jump higher. But when you start seeing Mark catching Timmy in the race, right? And then Timmy catching Mark in the leaping, then you got some competitive efforts going, and that end up becoming multiple efforts, right? And multiple efforts is a huge term in sports. And then active listening, I mentioned that earlier. Yes, I could listen, but am I absorbing? And the next thing you say, how does this benefit me? An active listener say, how could this knowledge benefit me? And then how could it benefit the team? And then inclusion, right? Asking your players, like, hey, you know what? I may not have been at my best today, and this is what I could have done better. What about you? What could you have done better? Okay, and how could I help you learn to improve the next time around? And then they become part of the solution. What is the play that you want to run right now that you think is going to put us in the best situation? And I think kids, you get the most fidelity and effort from kids when they feel like they're part of the solution. Accountability, around roles. Yes, Hassan may be identified as the best player, right? But the most important player is the one who makes the important play and the important decision, right? So once you are valuing decision making, every player on the court, every player on the field, at some point has to make a decision that is equitable to the most talented player. So it helps kids knock off the importance of particular players when everyone feels that their particular decision could hurt or help the team. And then the 5th thing is a belief system, right? I have a term that I say, hey, my players will eat glass for me, right? And what does that mean? Hey, I will never ask my players to eat glass, but guess what? If I ask them to, they will probably consider it. Right? They will more than likely they will consider it because they believe that I'm never going to put them in a situation that's going to harm them, hurt them, or put them in make them feel vulnerable or embarrassed or humiliated. Now, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, there's actually a book called that, right? Is when there's a term, that I use, I go culture overrules, right? If you start throwing rules at players, and I've seen youth coaches have 8th grade players, 8-year-old players, and they have like sheets upon sheets of rules, and they're kicking kids off, and they're replacing them, and they're hard on them, when you should just have 4 or 5, right? Because all of the rules that you want should be done to accomplish are cultural, right? What is culture? What culture is greater than rules? Right? When you come into a game, you sprint into the game. When you get off the court, you sprint off the court. Why? It shows effort. Even at your weakest moment, your most vulnerable moment coming out of a game, you are still doing it for the team, right? Culture is the understanding that what I am doing is for the best of, is not just to make my coach happy, it is the best possible thing for the team, right? Another dysfunction could be showing favoritism, right? It's a huge problem, right? And you have to, it's like teaching. Everybody talks about differentiating instruction. This is how you manage to avoid favoritism in your program, right? Yes, you honor those who do things. You honor the positive attributes of a player. Then you measure their growth, and you talk to them about their growth. Where have you gotten better? Where have you improved? And that way, it makes it okay to say to them, "Hey, you're not performing well here, but this is the next step I'm willing to that I want you to take." Not paying attention to areas of growth, like looking past the fact that you know Stanley came back to Stanley was 280 pounds. He comes back and he checks into the where our season is coming, and Stanley lost 40 pounds. And coach looks at him and says to Stanley, "Oh, Stanley, you're still overweight." But Stanley's like, "Hey, man, I spent all summer getting into shape." And you have to create these measures in your brain. Or if you know your kids, you should have those measurements. You should know what they're good at, what they like, what they don't like, what upsets them, how you should speak to them and communicate with them. That's your job as a coach. The youth coach has become so important that you now must take on this job, this role, because you have to develop young men and women, and not developing non-negotiables, right? You have to have some non-negotiables, but not as long, right? Some of your non-negotiables are should be very simple. Things that translate to larger moral qualities, like don't throw trash out the car window. It sounds crazy and it's not related to sports in so many people's mind. Don't throw trash out of my car window, right? Do not always get up for an older person when they get on the train. Do not cut somebody off without saying excuse me. Sit in the front of the classroom and always do an act of kindness, right? A random act of kindness, right? And then the fifth dysfunction of a team is dying on your coaching hill, right? Hating on evolution. Like, the game is changing. I'm not going to shoot threes. We're not going to do this. That's how you lose your players, right? You have to evolve. You have to be a student. You can't rely on your hierarchy and your power and this power dynamic to help you create your program or to build a program. You're not going to run a program on fear for long. You'd be Bobby Knight, all right? You need to be more Greg Popovich and not Bobby Knight, right? You need to be a lot more. And I want to say, the thing is with Bill Belichick is that there is a lot of freedom in Bill Belichick's system. But the thing is that the greatest thing that his non-negotiable is privacy and the intangibles. Everything positive may remind me of our experience, right? If you're a good coach and you want to build some trust in your program, sometimes with your kids, me and my greatest experiences with coaches in my life, that moment reminds me, everything positive reminds me of an experience I had with sports. That's what makes sports so powerful, right? And then if you want to build from the mud, right? You always create experiences for kids. The next thing is swag. And I'll talk more about that. Getting t-shirts. If you want to be felt in your community, you go to a laundromat, you want to see Everett Crimson Tide. You go to a car wash, Everett Crimson Tide. You see somebody walking down the street, Everett Crimson Tide. It just takes a lot of the angst that you walk down the street and I see somebody with the same shirt as me, and you sort of give that nod, like, that feels like winning right there. Reflections and connections, right? Making sure that you're able to ask your players and have your players reflect on this experience. Hey, listen, yeah, we did such and such over the weekend. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what are the things, and it's not so much, it doesn't have to be sport related. It just has to be life in general. Where do you feel does this particular moment or this thing that happened yesterday, how does this affect your life? And in the process, who do you feel close with? And how do you think the situation has built a better relationship with you and your family? So those are some of the things that I believe could help you begin and sort of get you to the midway point of that relationship, to build a stronger program, and build a program that's built on trust, relationships, and really like this love, right? This connection around love of the next person based on what your honor system is.
Thank you, Cory. You said a lot of things that I do want to touch base on. First, you gave us the 5 ingredients to creating a system. The reality is you can have the ingredients, but it doesn't mean you're a good cook. How do you know that you should be coaching youth sports?
Well, it's your self-reflection, right? What are you willing to tolerate, right? Let's be honest with you. Let's be very honest. Are you willing to tolerate, are you willing to turn a negative interaction with a kid into a positive one? Because the easiest thing to do is to kick a kid off the team or to get rid of them. And kids have spent their lives getting everywhere. A lot of times in this particular demographic, a lot of times the only thing kids are familiar with is rejection, right? And are you willing to stick with that particular kid no matter what? Because at 7 to 8 years old, 9, 10, or 11, no one should be able to remove a kid based on how they act. Because ultimately you would be removing yourself from a kid's life for them acting like a kid. So you have to really look at yourself and see and really you could do the same things we ask high schoolers to do, to journal and talk about it. Like, hey, I'm not in it because I want to raise a pro. I'm not in it because my son is the only variable that keeps me here. I have to care and be equitable in how I care about kids. If I'm able to do that without embarrassing students and getting feedback that's like not fair based, that's when I will know, because I would have had a commitment to it.
In your presentation, you mentioned that a coach should help a player see beyond playing pro, have a plan. A lot of people feel like as a coach, your job is over once the game is over, once practice is over. A lot of people know that's not true. What should a player-coach relationship look like?
It has to be a relation. It has to be relationship based, right? And it has to be a layered, a tiered level of understanding of, and you have to measure that growth, right? And how you measure the growth is by constantly prompting kids to think about themselves and evaluate and look at themselves. And once they're able to learn those things from you, those terms of development, like confidence. What does confidence mean? Where's my effort? How am I being accountable? Just be consistent, and to be consistent in the lives of children, it really helps determine your success with them, right? How consistent can you be with a kid in terms of holding them accountable to the things that make them special?
In a blog post, you wrote that the first step towards building that relationship, that coach-player relationship, is to have your players call you by your first name.
Yeah, I don't want to feel.
In some cultures, it's a respect thing, mm-hmm. right? In some cultures, it's a respect thing. Why is it for you essential to have your players call you by your first name?
Well, because I'm skillful, I feel like I'm skillful enough to maintain that sort of respect level from my players. I think I demand respect in enough capacity, in many other areas where I feel that is not disrespectful for them to call me by a name my mother gave me. I feel like there's accountability to being on time. There's accountability to do well in school. There's accountability to be a great person. There's accountability to improve, and the respect level is there that kids want to do that. Therefore, calling me by my first name becomes a very small variable and a big, big, big problem.
However, some coaches, especially because there are some coaches in here that are also teachers that work in the school. So if one of your players call you by your first name in front of a student, that student may feel like, okay, I have that, luxury of calling you by your first name too. How do you create that boundary?
Well, I think there's a clear difference between the relationships, right? It's very evident, right, that when you have, if my players walk into a room with me and there's players who are my students, right, as well from Everett High School, the relationship and the boundary will be there. I've had players actually check other students and say, hey, you don't get to call him that because you're not in the trenches with this guy, right? You don't get the long rides home from Andover that we used to take. You don't get to drive to Florida like we used to do. So I think once again, when people meet me, they understand what the accountability level is and how far they could go and take things, because I will correct you. No, it's Mr. McCarthy to you. But my player, who I sacrifice so much for, or who literally bleeds for me on the basketball court, they get to call me what my mom named me.
And those players you also said would eat glass for you.
Yes.
I feel when you're winning, it's easy to get players to buy in, especially when you have a winning tradition, when that's your culture. It's easy because everyone wants to win. However, when you're losing, how do you get players to buy in?
Well, when you're losing, you have to go back to the very intangibles and the fundamentals that create winning, right? Because whenever you lose a game, it's because of that, right? It's because you didn't show up and bring those fundamentals to the table. Now, here's the thing. It's up to the coach to say to the team, there are some nights where there's people who are better than you, and your team did every single thing that night. If you are a coach and you decide that you want to blame the kids for losing to a 7-foot tall Carl Towns, who's the number one player in the country, you shouldn't be coaching kids, because you would have found a way to turn a situation that could have been a learning tool into a situation that could possibly make kids dislike you or want to give you that same effort that creates a winner out of you.
You created a different culture, a new mission. How are you able to do that?
I think going above and beyond, right? And I think normalizing going above and beyond is something that I'm seeing a lot of people do, right? And I just remember that one night. I always remember when I think about going above and beyond. I remember that one night when I had my girls team and we had no car, we had no transportation, and it was literally 4 below zero. Kids are huddled in the back of a bus, and I wanted to make sure that every kid got home. It took 4 or 5 hours to get home because we took a bus with every kid to their house, and we had to get back on the bus, catch a bus, get back on the bus, catch a bus. And, I remember some of my peers was like clowning me for it. Like, why don't you just let them kids go home? And when kids feel security, and they feel like the one person who understands is a coach, we're underrated, right? Coaches are underrated. When some people say that, such and such is just a coach, right? We're at Everett High School. I'm sure there's people in the atmosphere who are like, they hired a coach, right? That is the biggest compliment ever. like coaches are involved. Like, who else, right, is involved in the academics of a child? Who else is involved in their, who sees them at their highest point of engagement? Who helps them plan their trajectory? Who else gets to talk to them about college? Who else gets to put them in their car and talk to them about life? Who else is going to pick up the phone at 11:30 p.m. when it's like, hey, I need to get out this house because the cops are here? Who else is doing that, right? And kids they have a funny way of showing their appreciation. And if you're a coach who's looking for immediate dividends from that, once again, you shouldn't be coaching, because ultimately the graduation rate, the graduation, the high school graduation, the college graduation, I am okay, because honestly, in a town of like Everett, Boston, Brockton, Lynn, Springfield, coaching and your involvement with the youth and coaching is life or death. Kids die in absence of coaches. Absolute fact. My best player I've ever coached, I met him when he was robbing somebody at the Reggie Lewis. And the reason he stopped and let that poor college student that went to Northeastern go is because I got out the ar and I was like, yo, don't you play ball? What are you doing? You know, and then the kid was like, hey, this is the guy that stopped me from robbing somebody. The next year he was in 7th grade, and next year he's in 8th grade. Next year he was at my school. And I was like, oh boy, you know, but you got to take on the challenge of doing that. And people can't expect to have immediate payoffs with kids. That's the problem that we're having right now. People want a payout. People want relevance. They want clout, and clout is killing our community.
You specifically, you said basketball changed new mission in a blog post that you wrote for Huddle. You said basketball changed new mission. And you gave us an example of that, about that kid you saw robbing somebody. How can sports in general, not just basketball, how can sports change communities?
All right, let's look at it from this perspective, right? In New Mission, 2005, 2006, no elevator, no speaker system. We had mice, rats. I used to walk in my office every day and clean off my desk. We had no gym, half a cafeteria, off-campus lunch. We had kids who didn't want to go there. We had constant emails from the district saying we're going to close your school in a year. We had low academic performance. By the way, we all got the same kids. I don't care who does well in middle school. The high school struggle is different, right? So all these variables, right, that are just working against our school, right? Later on that year, we beat one of the top teams in the city, my girls' team. Next thing you know, people started coming, right? The next time, that following summer, I decided to buy a whole bunch of t-shirts, and 300 t-shirts, and I just gave them out to whoever would take them. So eventually, kids love t-shirts, families love t-shirts, they love free t-shirts, they love free swag. One day I told you the story in our pre-interview that one day I was in a laundromat and I saw a kid with a New Mission shirt on, and it was so big on him, but he was wearing it. I was like, dude, where'd you get the shirt? What are you doing with that shirt? And he was like, I'm gonna go to this school and play basketball for you. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, you stay there. You ain't too tall. But ultimately, everywhere I went, I saw somebody who had a shirt, and then it just became a conversation. What is that school? Where is that school? So ultimately, the following year, the girls basketball team I was coaching ended up winning the state championship, right? We won it with 6 players. People have known the story. We end up on the front page of the newspaper in the Globe. Jackie McMullen writes an article about us. But here's the thing. If that didn't happen, we wouldn't have, when Hyde Park High School closed and they refurbished the building, the story got out that we didn't have a gym, right? I then take the boys' job. The night before the state championship, we practiced outside in the snow. True story, in the snow, trying to dribble a basketball. I'm trying to play in the state championship. So the word got out that this school has nothing, and they're in the paper all the time. And the city of Boston guys, they hear that Well, you're not providing them with a gym. Well, you're not, you're not, this school has a building that's about to close. The kids aren't performing. And we win a state championship and we win it again with the boys. And all of a sudden, hey, take this building. Hey, how about we fund this AP program for you guys, right? Advanced placement program. Hey, how about we give you guys a grant to build your SAT program? Hey, how about we invite you guys to visit our school, our college and university? Sports changed our school completely. And then our wait list went from 56 kids to 900, right? And for me, I wanted to take every kid, right? But, because of the way our school set up, it was a pilot school. Half the kids we had to go through a process, and the other ones were assigned by the district. So ultimately, the sports started taking kids off the streets and into our gyms to watch us play. Started taking kids from considering a night hanging out doing nothing to come to a game. Started saying, hey, so match that with the accountability of, hey, if you come here, I don't care if you don't play. If you're thinking about playing, you got to be academically eligible, right? And you got to tell me what your plan is. If you don't have a plan, you better plan to watch, because you won't play. And that's where the accountability tree comes. And then all of a sudden, you give city kids, urban kids, opportunity, resources, and some love, like some social respect. All of it pays off. Kids started going to college. We kept winning. And it became less about winning and more about the long-term trajectory. And that's how sports, the value of sport. I mean, look at football in Everett, like the things that are synonymous when you hear it, like basketball in New Mission, football at Everett, like all these super athletes in Brockton, basketball in Lynn. And look what it has done. But most importantly, you cannot let it be lost within our kids that you don't want to be just known for sports. You want to be known to be more than an athlete. And that's where your coach comes in.
Well, basketball did change New Mission. I think the most important part of that, not important, but the biggest part of that, why you were getting recognition and getting help, you were winning. And ever people want to come play, people think about football because they win. And Lynn, they think about basketball because they win. When people talk about Cory McCarthy, they talk about the state championships. They don't talk about the losses before that. In the past, you've mentioned how in a bus ride after a loss, your players said to you, we're terrible. Why are you still here? Why did you stay?
Right. So you gotta, if there's one thing, that's part of winning, right? And showing kids, right, that resilience is a real thing, right? And if you think about all the things that reject our kids leading up to, especially kids of color in neighborhoods, in towns and cities like Everett and Boston, the amount of rejection that kids get, I know 3-year-old young Black boys who've been in suspension hearings, right? I've known kids who have been labeled and who don't, so the only power dynamic they've had is to be big, Black, and intimidating, right? So when they're now faced with someone who is just refusing to go away, the best thing you can ever lend a student, a scholar, a child is your presence. That's where you have to clean up who you are to do it. You have to prepare yourself to be that person for a kid, right? If you're because you can't expect them to be something that you don't have the ability or hasn't shown the ability to either talk about why you're not that or strive to be that along with them. So I think me not trying to give up, and there was never a question of me giving up, because now people couldn't question what I was in it for, because I knew I was getting my head kicked in. But helping them understand, and in towns like ours, like what winning is, like defining winning. It's not just, you could lose every single game and still get your kids recruited. Your kids could still get recruited because of the culture of your program. college coaches love my players, my basketball players, because they know they can scream at them. Why could they scream at them? Because they're tough enough, because they've been getting screamed at about schoolwork and athletics and basketball for 4 years. So that's something that could translate to the next level. Now, why do employees love my players, right? They love them because they're going to show up to work on time, and they're going to have an understanding of what ethics and values are necessary to become a successful employee. And then with the ambition of wanting to not have a boss.
What did losing teach you?
Oh, man. Losing taught me so much that I knew when I was going to lose. Even when we played the hardest. I took a video, my last game ever coaching high school basketball. We played Arlington High School. I never say that the referees cheated or anything like that, but I actually put up a video, 8 videos of 8 calls in the last 2.5 minutes that went against us, that prevented us from winning. And no matter what, when you're a coach, football coaches talk about the football gods, basketball coaches talk about the basketball gods, baseball coaches talk about the baseball gods. You sometimes know what's going to happen, or you can predict it. I'll give you an example. When you blow a defensive assignment, Coach Turner says, you blow up the defensive assignment, the girl that you're supposed to be guarding, she shoots a 3, Turner turns her back to it because she knows it's going in. Right? It just becomes predictable. So what you can learn, what I was able to gain from losing, became more valuable than winning from an adult perspective, because I don't want kids to think losing is okay, right? But many times losing is learning, right? Failing up is a real thing, right? And there's no people who learn more from failing up than the people in the Everett community and the people in the Boston community and all these gateway and urban towns, right? Because we avoid failure, and sometimes we become numb to it so much that rationalizing it turns into winning and saying, you know what? Hey, I'm not doing that again. Or if I just do this, I could avoid this particular losing situation. So yeah, I think there's so much to learn from losing and so much to gain from winning.
Before I go on, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand if you want to speak. Please feel free. You talked about not leaving when you were losing. Players are able to lean on their coaches. You are able to give them support, help them believe in your system, believe that things will change. Who do coaches lean on?
The players. My players make you become better people. I've seen players, and they're not the best players. Players that are willing to put that effort into your team. I've seen them stop coaches from drinking, help them rebuild relationships with family members, show up to do their work with more efficiency. I've seen players help coaches improve their relationships with their children. I've seen players watch their coaches' sons and daughters because they look up to them. You see what I'm saying? One of the best things I've seen in a long time was Coach Sean Ryan from the Burke last year. And watching Sean Ryan's kids look up to his players was absolutely one of the best things you could ever see. So the greatest selling point to a coach should always be the players and their success and their growth and their trajectory and their development, right? If you are looking for the scoreboard to help decide whether or not you're in it to coach, you should not be coaching, right? There's a difference between an accumulation of talent versus coaching.
Shifting gears a little bit to on the court in the game. everyone has different coaching style. You have Brad Stevens, the Boston Celtics head coach, who's more laid back. You have other coaches who are more animated, but there's coaching etiquette. What should that look like for every coach?
Well, I mean, you have to know, like, so much of coaching is picking your spots, right? Like, you don't publicly embarrass an official, right? You don't do that, right? You don't, if you start arguing with I had to say I never argue with referees in the second half. I only do it in the first half, right? Because it's in the second half, if I stop, it makes them feel that I am not, they have done something where I'm not on their back anymore, right? So it's all the mental part of the game, right? And kids, if you're arguing with referees during a game, your players will. They'll disrespect them as humans the same way if you are as well. And part of coaching etiquette, it goes a long way towards developing young men and women, right? Like, I'll give you an example. All my players laugh at in ninth grade, all my players laugh at my shoes. All my players laugh at my sweaters. That's cool. Senior year, my players, one of that same said player will see me walking up the sideline and be like, yo, hey, coach, man, those are some nice shoes. And my response, yo, they're the same shoes. They're the same shoes. Coach, where'd you get that sweater from? The same place I got it 10 years ago. So now you're looking at kids who are just, they're judging you because they want to know if they're safe with you, to then want to become you. And you want them to become the best part of you. You don't want them to become the worst part of you. So that's where the etiquette comes in, right? I am a sidelines maniac, but I make sure when, as much as I get on referees for being wrong or whatever, when they are right, I openly compliment them, right? And they come over to me and I'm like, you know what? You are absolutely 100% right. Because if my players see that there is no consequences for being disrespectful, rowdy, or not having any, or not behaving like a half decent human being, they're gonna do the same thing. They're gonna think it's all okay.
Another type of etiquette there is parents. You as a coach can be as loud as you want or as laid back as you want, but it's hard to control the parents. Why is it important for parents to behave a certain way at their child's games?
I mean, I think first of all, the one thing that works is when you're establishing relationships with kids, you have to establish a relationship where parents feel secure enough to share with you in general, right? It can't be a surface level relationship. I don't know why anyone would leave, any parent would let their kid have a better relationship with a coach than they do, and just sort of like pass the buck, right? But that happens a lot, right? It's a part of circumstances, whatever, right? So I think you have to have the same way you have some cultural, situations with players, the cultures being greater than rules, is the same way you need to have with parents. I don't want parents sitting behind my bench, right? Because the same way that I'm able to pull this confidence out of a kid, reaction from a parent could snatch it from them, right? The same way I could promote, this is us, we are a team, we are one. You're still that individual at home in your mother's house or your dad's house. And getting parents to understand that is difficult. But what you have to do is make them feel like they're a part of the solution. You got to take your time and create the same measurement that I have with that ninth grader that couldn't use his left hand, who is now using it as a junior, using both hands as a junior. I need to share that with parents, because I think we get caught up by not talking to them about their child beyond basketball, That's what makes it okay for parents to want to publicly embarrass you. Like if you're a parent and you're confident that your kid is the last, may not getting and you know your kid may not get in the game, the reason you're not cursing out and flipping on the coach is because you understand why they're not getting in the game. You see what I'm saying? Like you understand, like, hey, he's not working hard at practice. She is not built for this situation and hasn't earned that trust to make that decision. As opposed to, nah, my kid sucks, or why he playing my kid. No, but if your communication is right, I think you asking parents, and I used to constantly ask parents all the time, hey, what did you think? And a lot of times they can't answer. You wonder why? They don't know enough basketball. So, hey, you want to play coach? What did you think? And then the number one question a parent will ask, besides why ain't my kid playing? The number one question would be, you don't think that my son our daughter could have helped you there? And your answer just needs to be up front. No, because I see them every day at practice. And that wide open layup that Mark made, I'm not confident your child would have made. Could they make it in a year? Maybe. Could they work at it and do it? Always resort back to effort and work ethic.
Coach Stanley has a question regarding this conversation. I think this is a conversation that's very touchy for a lot of coaches.
The good coach Stanley Chamberlain, my man.
First of all, I'd just like to thank you for taking your time and just, sharing the wonderful knowledge of your coaching experience. Being now going into my third year of coaching as a head basketball coach, I'm always striving to learn because I always believe you could always be better than your best. And learning from the greats just puts you in a position to want to be greater in your craft and perfecting your craft. But I just want to scale back to the piece in which you spoke about rejection. Have you ever had a moment in your career where you've done everything in your power to try to help a kid, but no matter what, they were just stuck in their own ways and there was no change in them? Like, have you ever had that moment? And if so, what have you done for that child?
It is that moment that got me out of coaching, because I feel like I got to work with more kids than a roster. And, it's just like the losses, right? I can tell you every single time I've lost a game, and I can tell you every score of the game. And it doesn't send me into depression or anxiety, but what it does, it grounds me, right? Even to forget the state championships or whatever, it's the losses, right? And just like the game on the court, off the court, the losses of, like, I've had players killed that I've tried to help. I've had players that I say to them, hey, if you leave this building right now, you're going to get killed. They've died, right? So as you can tell, like, it is so hard to do, but ultimately the best thing that you could do for them is to always maintain your presence, because your presence being absent could be the difference in them taking a major risk. So sometimes you may have lost, even though you may have lost some in your mind, but if you lost 3, you not being around could be the difference in you losing 20. So I've had kids where I'm like, I have to call this kid. I have to go see this kid in jail. I have to check in on this kid. And the greatest gift that you give them beyond basketball will be always your presence and the ability for them to depend on you. Because even the players that drove me the craziest, I had to take that guilt, because you feel like you failed them, and understand that the best thing I could do is to pick up the phone every time they call, or to text them and say, hey, are you good? That's it. Because you would have built a relationship already where they would say eventually, hey, I'm not good. I got lost. Or, and I think for me, because I was in it so deep, those are the things that I remember the most, the kids that we didn't get to reach. And, you know, just being that presence for them and maintaining that presence and that contact, like fighting to contact them. You know, I had a player that got killed, a former player got killed in January. And the last text I got from him was like, yo, can we get in the gym? And I couldn't, like, I took so long. I was in Barbados. I took so long to answer that kid's text. I'm saying to myself, like, damn, if I answered the text, maybe he wouldn't have been in that situation, yada, yada, yada. And, you know, you beat yourself up for it. But, like, I think the greatest gift you could just give them at that point is to not beat up on yourself, is to just continue to give them your presence. It's huge. And you do a good job of that because you're way more likable than me. I mean, like, I'll fight anyone who tells me that this dude's not one of the best humans around. So I appreciate you asking that question. And you know, for the record, you're going to get a state championship one day. Fact.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Right now, because of the health pandemic, there's really no practice, no games. How do you maintain that presence in your players' lives?
Text, group chat, home visit. I love the home visits. But yeah, text, group chat, and then like random things, like just understanding. I think we fight as adults to like not understand the relevance of like being culturally responsive to students and players. Like, yo, I'll give you an example. What was that today? No, the other day. A rapper got killed in Chicago, like King Von. And I was like, let me listen to King Von's music. And I was like, damn, this dude is a great storyteller. So I have group chats with all my former players based on the year of graduation. No lie. They'll all tell you. I have like group chats, right? And I'm like, I put like a Spotify of like King Von's song. I got a story to tell. I think I got a story to tell. And they were like, dude, I can't believe you. You know, it just started a whole conversation. And it just, you know, the fact that I'm still trying to understanding their language and still fighting to understand their language is a huge deal. I'm not the old man that's trying to be hip. I'm the guy that just speaks their language. And you communicate better. I think so many people fight to, like, listen, I'll be clear. Majority of the world hates Black people. Okay? Majority, but there's one thing that everybody could agree on. No one likes teenagers. They're the most hated demographic in the world. And when somebody pays attention to them and is very much interested in their development, you could see, you can start seeing and really achieving some goals together. And but it's your job as a coach to help them reflect and help them with the terminology and help them reflect. And that's huge.
We're getting towards the end, so if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to ask. You talked about still talking to former players. When does that coach-player relationship end exactly?
It never ends. It legitimately never ends. Every day I hear from a former player, whether it's boys or girls, and they're all over the place. And you know what? My players really don't say thank you because they know that they had a similar effect on me. You know, like they know that their college graduation was bigger than a state championship. So it's like cultural, like what is understood. Yes, the plan was accomplished. I'm not going to promise you a state title, but if you do what you're supposed to do, you get into college and you graduate and you finish in college. And for me, I think instilling those goals and if you talk about something long enough with a kid, it becomes more important to them. Like, think about it, right? Like, I've had kids that come into school and they're like, I'm here to win a state championship. And then I've had them senior year graduate with that same kid I saw in a laundromat that came in and was like, hey, I'm gonna win a state title. I'm gonna come to your school and win a state title. He came to my school and won a state title with me. right? But here's the thing. It didn't matter. The thing that hurt him the most was that when he graduated and won a state title and he was a senior, it hurt him the most that that was the end, right? And I think helping them understand, no, we're here for a while. Stanley Chamberlain's going to always talk to his players. Cory McCarthy's always going to talk to his former players. And essentially, by me moving on and retiring and going to administration, I now realize that all these kids are my players because I'm legitimately treating them the same way. You know, I give my personal phone number. There's not one kid in Everett that does not have my personal phone number. That is an absolute fact. Now, people are like, oh, what if they prank you? If a kid pranked me, I would laugh so hard. Like I'd be laughing right with him. Oh, you suck, Cory, you suck. Okay. I'll be crying, I'll be cracking up. And I think people get too uptight with the power dynamics between them, coaches and players, and adults and children.
Personally speaking, I've been out of high school for over 10 years, and I still have a very good relationship with my high school coach. I want to end on this. You've won over 300 games. You have multiple championships. What are you most proud of as a coach?
Achieving a career for students, for my former players, like them being in a career or graduating from college. When I to see that's the true championship for them, like being able to provide for their families, being better than their parents, going to college and following through and improving their quality of life. I mean, that is the key. Like banners, nobody's thinking about how we won in 2010. Only us within our circle. But there's no one going to bed thinking about how I changed my game plan or one of my players, I never allowed her to play defense because she could just hit threes, but rebound and throw it to her and she'll hit a three. I literally never let her walk from the defensive end ever, right? But to have those kids, your youth kids, come in as kids and walk them through that trajectory and sell them on not a dream, but sell them on a goal and walk them through their objective towards a goal is the thing that I'm most proud of. And you see things in kids, right? I'll tell you one thing, and if anybody's watching and you want to measure or come up with one strategy with a kid, if you see a young kid, I actually met with a girl today on Zoom, myself and shout out to Ms. Hooks, the guidance counselor. We met with a kid today, and her GPA was through the roof, like 4.6. She's a sophomore. She's doing dual enrollment, and she wants more, right? And she wants more. And it is so amazing to see kids like that. It's so inspiring. But if you ever want to do something and inspire a kid or help them in a very not invasive way, I had a kid that I just called because she was so smart. I called her Harvard. I was like, oh, I'm not even calling you Night. Her name was Niley. I'm not even calling you Niley anymore. I'm gonna call you Harvard. And by the time the kid got to 10th grade, she's chasing Harvard. she wants Harvard. The grades want to be Harvard. And if you reach for Harvard and you get Brown and Princeton and BU and BC, you're, instead of Blue Hill Ave and Center Street and Dudley Street, you're good as gold. And find different ways to inspire kids and just and help them understand what real winning looks like.
I think one of the biggest things I learned tonight is the impact we all can have on the lives of youth, whether it's through sports or education or both. We can teach them how to believe in themselves and reach certain goals, even goals that they didn't have. Cory, I want to thank you so much for joining me and all you guys tonight. It's been a pleasure hearing from you and speaking with you. I hope you all learned something, and I hope you all continue to have great impacts on the lives of so many children.
Michelle, you are great. Folks, make sure you follow. I would like you to do a shameless promotion of your podcast.
It's called Help Me Understand. It's mostly about sports, but maybe we'll go and talk more about students and youth and how sports can change the lives of so many kids out there.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.